Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, May 19th, 2020. Time for yet another show. The world continues to pace. We are at, look at that. We made it. Worldometers tells us we've cleared the 92,000 deaths mark here in the United States. So they continue to climb. I am noticing a bit of a slowdown, and that's good news. And I hope it keeps up because, of course, we're reopening the country, regardless of whether it's slowing down or not. But that's good news. We haven't seen the giant acceleration yet, and some of these states, it's been a while since they began loosening their restrictions. Some we're going to have to wait for more results, but it's encouraging news. Encouraging news also collected from various places around the country. Also some discouraging news too. We'll catch up with all of that. The best bad news. How about that? Are you like this? The best bad news I've seen so far comes from Georgia. And what do I mean by that? A Georgia church that opened, about 2 weeks ago and had their regular, looks to be from the pictures anyway, I don't know whether it's an old picture or not, relatively crowded services. And, the bad news part is they experienced an outbreak. Who are we talking about here? The Catoosa Baptist Tabernacle. Wow. And Pastor Justin Gazaway, I have no idea. Gazaway, reopened in Ringgold, Georgia. I'm sure we've mispronounced all of that. It's pretty packed. Anyway, they had an unfortunate outbreak, and several families had contracted the virus. Let's see, when they restarted in-person services in April 26th. And, they had the outbreak, and guess what? I thought this was going to go this way. Well, so what? It's the Lord's will. We're going to power through this, and don't worry about it. No, they're reclosing. So, it's bad news that people got the virus. It's bad news that they have to reclose. It's good news that they realize that's how you respond to a situation like that. I really didn't think we would see anybody reclosing anything, and it might be entirely different for businesses. It may be certainly going to be different for states, but I don't know. I'm going to take my encouragement where I can find it, where we see people anxious to reopen, and anxious, I think, probably, I'm assuming a lot about them, because they are regular churchgoers and all excited about getting back into church. And it's reported on in the Christian Post. I guess I sort of thought that they would be inclined the other way. So I'm glad to see that they say, we may have to go back to our remote services and take some time off here. It should concern them that this happens, but I think we should all take some encouragement from the fact that people who fit the profile, I guess you might say, and you shouldn't be profiling anybody, but it happens. We'll talk a little bit about that probably later on as well. But they fit the profile for ignoring the whole thing or pretending it didn't happen or there's some other reason for it or somehow Obama did it, I guess. But no, they're going to close down. And I don't know. I guess I'm proud of them for recognizing what's going on here and how to deal with it, although I don't know that that's going to fix it. You'd be prouder of them if they said, let's not have opened for a few more weeks and give ourselves even more time to get past this critical point. And I don't know, it may be that closing down is essentially of negligible value. It's certainly not going to cure anybody who's got the virus from there now. I guess it'll prevent continued spread among the congregation members, and but I'm assuming that if the church recloses and tells the congregation why they're doing it and why that's a smart thing to do, maybe people will then stay home and self-isolate once again for 2 weeks to try to prevent community spread outside of their church. We'll see. The church did not say, I just thought I'd add this at the end here, how many of their families were affected, but did note that only about 25% of congregants had participated in in-person worship services during the time that they had reopened. But what can I tell you? That's all it takes. So I don't know. I'm glad that they're being open about it. I'm glad they're being somewhat honest about it, because that's not happening everywhere. This is, let's see, there's some other detail in the article here. All right, well, more discussion about what else is happening in Georgia, but I think we've kind of covered all of that. All right. I just thought that was interesting. Usually you see people try and make some excuses and say we're going to power through this thing, and you just throw up your hands and say, you know, Georgia's doomed, but maybe some pockets of Georgia will be able to manage this at least within reason, I suppose. I don't know. I can't give them too much credit for it, but well, that's what we're doing. That's how we'll start the day. Because otherwise, had I not started that way, we would have had to start with the raging debate over whether or not it was permissible or wise or strategically valuable or out of keeping with progressive values or whatever, for Nancy Pelosi to have referred to Donald Trump as morbidly obese yesterday. So, you know, I guess we'll have to deal with that. That's it's a big deal. It had context. Of course, you will almost all, I think, at this point have heard that Trump gave time over yesterday to this bright, shiny object, with which I readily admit we will distract ourselves, because we can pay attention to an awful lot of things. I guess the best way to say it, of what he did yesterday, was he claimed to the press during a press conference that was supposed to have nothing to do with this, I think. I don't know what he's doing anymore. Who cares? I don't know why he's calling press conferences. He is, and he wants to talk to people. He loves doing that. So he told the press yesterday that he has been taking hydroxychloroquine for a week and a half, which, if true, would be amazing, because he would have told the truth, but also because there's this drug involved. And of course, as we've learned over the past couple of weeks, apparently it carries some exceptional risks. Pelosi was pointing out that what's he, like 73, 74 years old? He's pretty heavy. I don't know whether there's a difference. Doctors will have to tell me whether there's a difference between, well, our categories go to, overweight, and then to obese, and then to morbidly obese. I don't know whether he fits it. Does he really technically fit in the category of morbidly obese? Is there such a category? Is it just, or obesity is a morbidity, and if you have it, you're morbidly obese? I don't know. I don't keep track of such things. Lots of pearl clutching out there, some of which is justified and some of which is not. Nobody likes, we're not supposed to fall into the trap of body shaming, but I don't know if there's any shaming per se if the guy doesn't feel shame. But then if he doesn't feel shame, what's the point of saying it? I don't know. I guess you could say, well, she was making a medical point about this thing, saying that obesity is just another complicating factor for experimenting with drugs that were likely to, have a substantial chance of doing some great damage to you if you're not taking it for the indicated purpose. Other than that, what can I tell you? The guy is obese, and she pointed it out. She didn't linger on it. She didn't make the whole interview about his obesity. She was pointing out, it's not very wise for anyone to be taking this drug improperly. More so the case when you are morbidly obese, and it also puts the rest of us at risk, because for better or for worse, we are all in the mode of pretending that this guy is legitimately elected the president of the United States, and it will cause complications if the president of the United States drops dead from complications arising from taking hydroxychloroquine for no particular reason. Karen points out Pelosi did say, they say. Now, is it like they say there's problems? I watched once the clip, and I laughed because because Trump is morbidly obese, and it's funny when you point that out to him because he hates having that pointed out to him, and it makes him angry. Although, do I have worries that he may nuke somebody because he's angry? Always a problem. Hasn't quite happened that way yet. Does she say they say he's morbidly obese? Because he is. Or does she say they say that you shouldn't take it if you're morbidly obese? I can't remember exactly what it was. All right. Well, there's an awful lot of other things happening. I'm sure we could pay some more attention to some of these other things. But in the meantime, I would say, one of the favorite pastimes of armchair analysts like us, yes, me too, is to worry about which shiny objects are distracting people from what. And I would suggest to you that probably worrying too much about whether or not it's okay to say that the president is morbidly obese in passing on your way to making another relatively sound point is just not worth the time. So we're done with it. That'll be the end of it. More things are happening in Georgia than just this church opening and reclosing. But now, as I see Greg Dworkin tweeting this morning, there are open accusations of manipulating the numbers. What does he say? He's tweeting here, flat out accusation of doctoring the disease numbers, and pointing to an article referencing Georgia. I have two tucked away referencing Florida. Seems like a game that they're playing down south. Let's see what's happening in Georgia. The Post reports, by order of Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, the day after Thursday is now Sunday. Well, Wednesday used to be Sunday at Carvel, and now the day after Thursday is Sunday. Dana Milbank, the disc whisperer, everyone remembers, is responsible for this piece from yesterday. Georgia's Republican Governor Brian Kemp needed a way to show that he hadn't been rash to reopen restaurants, theaters, nail salons, and the like in April. Yes, we did hear about this one yesterday. His administration came up with a creative solution. They doctored the statistics. Last week, Georgia's Department of Public Health released a graph showing a dramatic, steady decline in cases, deaths, and hospitalizations in the state's 5 most affected counties from a peak on April 28th, just before the state's restrictions were eased, to near zero 2 weeks later. But on closer inspection, the dates on the chart showed a curious ordering. April 30th was followed by May 4th. May 5th was followed by May 2nd, which was followed by May 7th, which in turn was followed by April 26th. The dates had been resorted to create the illusion of a decline. The 5 counties were likewise resorted on each day to enhance the illusion. It's bad graph making, obviously. And it's called lying, and you're not supposed to do it. I think we did mention this yesterday, although if not, it was certainly a topic of discussion for most of us on Twitter over the weekend. Yeah, they just reshuffled the dates in any order they wanted. What order did they want? They wanted them in the order of the dates were arranged in order of their statistics as represented in the bar graph declining. They were arranged in size order, essentially. And so that it would look, people would take a glance and say, oh, that's Georgia's chart. And I mean, the chart's accurate, and I guess, I don't know, maybe the numbers were actually wrong too. But if the numbers on the chart were correct, and we didn't check those are correct, maybe, reports for each of the days. It's just, we don't care what order days come in. Well, of course, a graph like that is supposed to be usable as a tool to illustrate a downward curve. We're supposed to be flattening the curve and looking for the downward slope of a curve. And that's assuming, of course, that the curve is represented to you in chronological order. That was a pretty interesting development. Only in Brian Kemp's Georgia is the first Thursday in May followed immediately by the last Sunday in April. You get the joke here. And only in President Trump's America would we have the producers of such flim-flam, rawr, it's lies, leading the reopening of our national economy. The governor's office apologized for what State Representative Scott Holcomb, an Atlanta Democrat, properly called a cuckoo representation of data. I think it's a little worse than cuckoo. It's a little worse than something that can be just apologized for. It's pretty amazing, quite honestly. Let's see. Those who cheer the reopening, citing this sort of faulty data, called Georgia's reopening a triumph, and say those, like me, that's Dana Milbank, the dick whisperer, who raised cautions were dead wrong. The Wall Street Journal's James Freeman said the Georgia model is an encouraging escape from lockdown, which he hopes can inspire people to resume necessary activities. The conservative site Newsbusters went with this headline, Milbank's bunk. Georgia defies liberal number one death destination predictions. Amazing. I don't really know how you. It's one thing to spread the lie in the first place. It's another thing to get caught in it and then have people come back and say, you're the one who's wrong for catching them for being wrong. That's really a new twist. Well, it's not. It was bad, and it's bad to react to being caught that way. But there's more and there's worse. I mentioned Florida has a story, and in fact, it's got two, one that leads to another. Let me see if did I make any decisions about which one is the better one to start with. No, they're both here. One from CBS, the local CBS affiliate, and one from Florida Today. I don't know if they both cover the same exact information, but they were tweeted around separately as though they built on one another. But I think Florida Today was the first and original source here. As Florida reopens, COVID-19 data chief gets sidelined and researchers cry foul. Why is this? Because they were sidelined for bad reasons. Let's see. Okay. Late last Friday, we begin here. Who's our reporter? Alessandro Morazzi Sassoon. Oh, how do you like that? That's a hell of a name. Anyway, last Friday, the architect and manager of Florida's COVID-19 dashboard, the online dashboard tracking how many people, how many cases, how many deaths, where are they, etc. Florida's COVID-19 dashboard, praised by the White House officials, for its accessibility. You can find it on the internet, I guess. Wow, that's great. Announced that she had been removed from her post, causing outcry from independent researchers now worried about the government's censorship there. The dashboard has been a one-stop shop for researchers, the media, and the public to access and download tables of COVID-19 cases, presumably in chronological order, testing and death data to analyze freely. It had been widely hailed as a shining example of transparency and accessibility. But over the last few weeks, it had crashed and gone offline. I mean, those things can happen, but it's, in scare quotes, crashed. And I guess gone offline is worrisome because, I wonder how Florida's doing. We worry that they might be encouraging further community spread by opening prematurely. Let's check their open and accessible numbers. Hey, they're not accessible. What's going on? Well, to see crashed in scare quotes gives one pause, let's say, if we want to be fancy about things. And you worry maybe the data is bad and they don't want to present it anymore. Well, in fact, data has gone missing without explanation as well, and access to the underlying data sheets has become increasingly difficult. The site was created by a team of Florida Department of Health data scientists and public health officers headed by Rebecca Jones. Notable in this case because it's spelled funny with a K. Not often the case, but increasingly. It's not rare. It's just okay. Rebecca Jones is the head of the operations there. She announced last week her removal as of May 5th. So retroactive as well. In a heartfelt farewell note emailed to researchers and other members of the public who had signed up to receive updates on the data portal. Citing, quote, reasons beyond my division's control, unquote, Jones said her office is no longer managing the dashboard, is no longer involved in publication, fixing errors, or answering questions, quote, in any shape or form. So I guess she's kind of like fired from the project that she launched here. That's a good way to describe it. But of course, remember, everyone loved this project because it told them, allegedly, the actual story on the ground with COVID-19 in Florida, where there's such a sizable elderly population, and everyone was worried. Well, So now when data goes missing or is incorrectly reported or is not reported at all, or all the information goes offline, don't tell me, Rebecca Jones with a K, I don't work there anymore. She warned that she does not know what the new team's intentions are for data access, including what data they are now restricting. So what they did here, of course, it's worth pointing out, they recruited her to build a website that was, I guess, at least originally praised for its transparency and accuracy. And then once the brand was built, that Florida has a trustworthy COVID-19 dashboard online, they chucked her overboard and said, now the people who will lie at our instruction to make us look good will be handed the keys to this thing, and it'll look the same. And having been praised from the White House as being accurate and accessible and open, a great open source for serious research, I want you to change the numbers so that it looks better, so that serious researchers will accept our doctored numbers, and everyone will come to believe that we're doing much better than we actually are, and then we'll look great. Then we won't have to worry about things like, are we curing anybody, or have we stopped community spread, or is everyone in Florida dead? If we just declare them alive using this fantastic website that someone has already said is accurate, well, then we'll be in great shape. Well, anyway, let's see. We'll continue on with this story. I understand, appreciate, and even share your concern about all the dramatic changes that have occurred and those that are yet to come, she wrote. As a word of caution, I would not expect the new team to continue the same level of accessibility and transparency that I made central to the process during the first 2 months. In other words, under new management, and they might not be dedicated to telling you the truth about what's happening here. After all, my commitment is largely, arguably entirely, the reason I am no longer managing it, which she's obviously trying to say here. I don't know why she's beating around the bush, but you get the idea here, right? I don't think the new team will continue the same level of accessibility and transparency. My commitment to accessibility and transparency, after all, are the reason I'm no longer there, which is a pretty clear statement without actually saying it. I don't know why she didn't say it, that they are interested not in what she was doing there, but presenting things that are not accessible and or not transparent. That's what we're looking for here. That's the job, and you want the other thing, so you're fired. Jones signed off. It was great working with you guys. Good luck and stay safe. Jones did not respond to emailed requests for comment, and the Department of Health did not reply to inquiries from Florida today regarding Jones's removal and access to data. But researchers who have relied on unobstructed access to underlying raw data said they interpret Jones's removal as a clear indication of government censorship of science. We would not accept this lack of transparency for any other natural disaster, so why are we willing to accept it here? Said Jennifer Larson, a researcher at the University of Central Florida's Lab X. And the answer is, you probably would accept this lack of transparency for another natural disaster. You would say that you wouldn't in any other situation, but it would be handed to you and you would say, well, what am I going to do about it? I will complain to the newspapers, and in the meantime, I will not have access to this information. There isn't anything that you will do. But I mean, there are things you could do about it. You won't, and I don't blame you. These things are things that we could all be doing, but aren't doing. As a result, what do we mean? You could go to the Florida Department of Health with pitchforks and torches and drag the head of the department out and beat him mercilessly. If it's him. I'm trying to be careful here and say we can't assume the gender of the person who heads the Florida Department of Health. I'm a cautious person. These are things that can be done. But, they generally fall outside of our norms, and you know how protective we are of norms. We don't want to encourage such things. But the other things you could do is you could wait long enough and replace the governor, but that's going to take a long time. You could prevail upon the Florida state legislature to impeach the governor, but that won't work because, Republicans don't punish crimes by other Republicans. So, you're going to accept it, essentially, in this situation. Unless you wanted to do those things which are a bad idea for democracy and break all our norms. But they are out there. Jones's removal and changes to the dashboard access is especially unusual given that the dashboard was lauded in April. No, I can't believe it. Yes, it's true. On CBS's Face the Nation by Dr. Deborah Birx, a top official of President Donald Trump's coronavirus task force, now discredited, of course, as we've learned along the way. If you go to the so here's the praise. Hooray. There was a lot of good things in there. When it was good, it used to have, you could go and look at your community's cases and tests, district by district, county by county, and zip code by zip code. I don't know whether that's any longer the case. Jones was also profiled by Esri, E-S-R-I, I don't know, the software company that provides the product used to build the interactive visualization. Well, that's a bit of a conflict of interest. Anyway, by all accounts, she did a fantastic job giving people real and useful information. And so, because the governor of Florida is a Republican, she was fired from that job. We can't be going around giving people easy access to accurate information, or else they will figure out that we have not done a good job and we are faking our numbers in order to, I don't know what, reopen the economy. For what purpose? I couldn't tell you, because if everybody gets sick in Florida and has to go back underground, then all progress is lost. But then again, we could always just report that, we discovered gold in Florida and we're now the richest state in the world. Try that. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. That's the situation with the Florida website. I think we've pretty much summed that up. There was some interesting material, I think, in the CBS report that might have been a little bit more explicit about the facts here, although they may just have been interpreting her statements, essentially, and reading further into them. I don't really know why she didn't just go straight out and say, yeah, I was fired because they were asking me to lie about the data and I wouldn't do it, and therefore they removed me from the job. But every indication is given that was the case. So, all right. I don't know what makes people shy about saying that, but maybe they're worried about being sued somehow. I have no idea what their interest is. All right. Well, anyway. Yes. On the subject of the president saying that he takes hydroxychloroquine now, I guess a couple of things we could note about that. One is that he's Donald Trump, and so that means there's a pretty good chance that he's lying about taking hydroxychloroquine. Why would he be lying about that? One reason that he might do that he might lie about it, is in order to give the impression that, he hasn't died. And so far, actually, honestly, he's not doing all that well with that impression. I think he is dead, but, what can I tell you? I'm a skeptic. It's difficult to convince me that he's a living, breathing person and still entitled to the office of the presidency. But that's just me. I don't know. Your mileage may vary on that. But essentially, he's trying to give the illusion that he is taking it and it is therefore, and that it's safe, and you know it's safe, as he hoped you would, because he's not dead. I guess that's really it. I imagine he might also want people to infer from it that, well, we heard not that long ago that there were cases of coronavirus right inside the White House, including in people close to him who had been diagnosed as positive. That is to say, they had tested as positive. I don't know if they were showing any symptoms. And we haven't had any news about that. No news that I know of about whether or not Katie Waldman, the, what is she, a speechwriter, spokesperson maybe, for Mike Pence, whether she's developed any symptoms. Of course, she's married to Stephen Miller, who's all over the West Wing and always in the president's face and writing his speeches for him. So that was the major concern, I think, for Trump, was that Katie would give it to Stephen, Stephen would give it to Trump. And maybe they're trying to engineer it this way. I think in his comments, his stupid-ass comments yesterday, he said he'd been taking it for about a week and a half. Now, he'd been threatening to take it for like a month. And then, of course, they came out with the information, it can cause heart damage and could even potentially kill you. And I thought it would be a fantastic thing then if he took hydroxychloroquine and, he might be killed and then we'd be rid of him once and for all. I'm very cruel that way. I'm not good at, allowing people as damaging and as disgusting as Donald Trump is the benefit of the doubt. I like to see them eliminated. It's a failing. Anyway, I thought, well, it would be a fantastic thing if he removed himself from the office of the presidency by accidentally killing himself by dosing himself with a drug not indicated for his condition, and it has extraordinarily dangerous side effects. And then if he died, then most people who were considering taking hydroxychloroquine would say, hey, I don't know whether we should do this. There will surely be some. I wish to die the same glorious death as our beloved leader. Okay, so, a few of those people will jump off the cliff. But most people would then say, if nothing else, I will leave the hydroxychloroquine stores in place for those who take it for malaria or lupus or whatever else people might actually take it for at the direction of a doctor. And things would get better all around, including, having a different president, even if it was Mike Pence, who also, by the way, now that Katie Waldman is in self-isolation, we haven't seen much of Mike Pence. People are beginning to wonder about people who have not been in the public eye a whole lot lately. We don't know what happened to Katie Waldman. No one knows the valet, of course, who that was. So it's hard to tell whether he's missing from the scene, but a lot less Mike Pence, which is fine by me. And I guess Stephen Miller, too, is staying home and self-isolating. But, people. Then the speculation branched out from there. Where's Melania? How come we never... So I don't know. I don't know who's sick out there. Maybe there's always the possibility that he did, in fact, demand to take hydroxychloroquine, although it's very difficult to understand why a White House doctor who doesn't want to be called to account would say, yes, you should take this because you're supposed to be protecting the health of the president. And I mean, maybe he'd be a national hero for giving him the hydroxychloroquine. That could be motivating it. I don't know. But I thought it was interesting that he pinned the date to a week and a half ago, which is about when we found out that one of his 4 valets, which is incredible to me, had tested positive for coronavirus. And then the next day, I think we found out that Katie Waldman also had tested positive. And then he made the stupid statements about, I don't understand. 1 minute she's negative, the next she's positive. That's kind of the way illness goes. It was very distressing that we couldn't understand why he couldn't understand such things. But maybe there's some truth to it, or maybe it's just more stupid rumors that he loves. He loves to lie about things, as you know, just for sport. But the fact that it came up in his mind a week and a half ago after people inside the White House began testing positive for coronavirus, maybe that was what sparked the idea. Maybe I'll take more hydroxychloroquine. After all, and the doctor said, no, you can't. You're morbidly obese. It will kill you. And, well, all right, but you can have 2 scoops of ice cream every night. Okay. There's only so much a doctor can do. But I won't write you this prescription. I won't allow you to have it. So maybe the idea was in his head for a week and a half. Maybe it's true, and I don't know. But there are lots of reasons to think he's lying about it, including the fact that he just lies about everything. I note, for example, also along the way, for instance, Michelle Goldberg, New York Times columnist, who commented on this, that the side effects of hydroxychloroquine include paranoia, hallucinations, and psychosis, which, well, George Conway, for instance, was prompted thereafter to comment, how will they then be able to tell if it's affecting him, as he usually exhibits these symptoms even without the hydroxychloroquine. You see, I'm helping explain his joke for you. And now we all get it, right? Well, that's one of the problems with it. Although I did also see someone else comment that it is rumored that weight loss is another perhaps side effect of all that. And so that, I think, leans in the no column for him. All right. Other coronavirus news that I think we might be able to comment on relatively briefly. Bloomberg has this report. I guess the South Korean scientists still working diligently on trying to figure out just what the hell is going on with this whole thing. But here's a news headline for us. COVID patients testing positive after recovery aren't infectious, study shows. That's good news. We had big questions about that. And I'm happy to find out that at least this initial result sounds like a good one. Hee-Soo Lee and Jason Gale reporting for Bloomberg. Researchers are finding evidence that patients who test positive for the coronavirus after recovering aren't capable of transmitting the infection and could have the antibodies that prevent them from falling sick again. So you can test positive for presence of the virus in your system, but if you have sufficient antibodies, you're not ill, you're not suffering the symptoms, and perhaps as a result of that, perhaps as a result of something else, I don't know, but in combination, what they're finding is that patients who have recovered but still test positive aren't spreading the infection. That's good news. Scientists from the Korean Centers for Disease Control and Prevention studied 285 COVID-19 survivors who had tested positive for the coronavirus after their illness had apparently resolved, as indicated by a previous negative test result. In case you were wondering, they didn't just stay positive the whole time and then have their sniffles go away or manage to make it off of a ventilator or whatever, however you want to measure the success of recovering from COVID-19. They not only had their symptoms subsided, but they tested negative for a presence of the virus in their system. Nonetheless, they later tested positive again. And I guess here, one unanswered question is we still don't know a great deal about the accuracy of the testing that's available. Some tests are clearly better than others, but we've also read news that some of these tests are judged to be inaccurate in their results up to nearly half of the tests. So I think we're seeing 40% inaccurate reports out of the Abbott Labs test that they were using at the White House, the rapid test. Anyway, assuming that the testing is accurate, they are finding a lot of times people recover and then they're negative and then they become positive again. We've heard a couple of cases of that in the United States. And in fact, after we get off of this article, we'll share one other follow-up along the same lines. Anyway, so Korean CDC folks were saying they studied 285 patients who had tested positive. Their illness had resolved, got a negative test result, and then later come back positive again. The so-called re-positive patients weren't found to have spread any lingering infection. They're very good about the contact tracing there in South Korea. And virus samples collected from them couldn't be grown in culture, indicating the patients were shedding non-infectious or dead virus particles. That's good news. The findings, reported late Monday, are a positive sign for regions looking to open up as more patients recover from the pandemic that has sickened at least 4.8 million people. The emerging evidence from South Korea suggests that those who had recovered from COVID-19 present no risk of spreading the coronavirus when physical distancing measures are relaxed. That is very helpful to know. The results mean health authorities in South Korea will no longer consider people infectious after recovering from the illness. Research last month showed that so-called PCR tests for the coronavirus's nucleic acid can't distinguish between dead and viable virus particles, potentially giving the wrong impression that someone who tests positive for the virus remains infectious. And it was a good assumption until we could prove otherwise, and hooray, we're proving otherwise. The research may also aid in the debate over antibody tests, which look for markers in the blood that indicate exposure to the novel coronavirus. Experts believe antibodies probably convey some level of protection against the virus, but they don't have any solid proof yet, nor do they know how long any immunity may last. A recent study in Singapore showed that recovered patients from severe acute respiratory syndrome, or SARS, are found to have significant levels of neutralizing antibodies 9 to 17 years after initial infection, according to researchers including Daniel E. Anderson of Duke NUS Medical School. Other scientists have found higher levels of IgM. I hope I'm that's what it's. Those are the letters, but capital I, lowercase g, m, an antibody that appears in response to exposure to an antigen in children, according to an article published in, remember this one, MedRx, what do we say, IV4, what did we decide that was going to be? Anyway, and that suggests younger populations have the potential to produce a more potent defense against COVID-19. The study has not been certified by peer review. So there is another possible explanation for the lower numbers, extraordinarily low numbers among children, except for this now emerging multi-system inflammatory disease, which is still relatively rare compared to the infection rate of the virus itself. Okay, so I mentioned that there was another connected article. Here's an update from Politico. Update that was worrisome yesterday and perhaps less so right now on the USS Theodore Roosevelt, about which we were not supposed to get any further news. You'll recall that this is the ship that put into port under emergency circumstances in Guam in late March, early April. Captain fired. No word, by the way. I haven't seen any news on the reinstatement of Captain Crozier, was it, to his command on the Roosevelt, although that was said to be in the offing. But here's the news. They went into port. They offloaded everybody pretty much off the boat. They sanitized what surfaces they could, put everybody in isolation, and then they were still finding their case count growing, even though everyone was in quarantine or isolation. I guess quarantine for the positives, isolation for the not yet positive, but then people were popping up positive anyway, even after being in isolation. That was kind of troublesome. Now, this potentially troublesome news, maybe not so bad though, given what we're learning from Korea. 13 now, it was 5 the day before, now 13 USS Theodore Roosevelt sailors test positive after recovering from COVID-19. That was worrisome yesterday. Now we have reason to think that might not be quite so terrible, although the subhead, not really helpful either. The Navy also reports one crew member has tuberculosis, which I don't know how that happened, but they were all in isolation on Guam, and somebody came out of there with tuberculosis, and I guess we're going to have to take a closer look at that one now. Ugh. Okay. Lara Seligman reporting for Politico. I guess we'll just give you the first couple paragraphs and see if there's any more detail to tease out of this. 13 sailors aboard the aircraft carrier USS Theodore Roosevelt have tested positive again for COVID-19 after recovering from the disease and returning to the ship, which has been stranded in Guam since late March after an outbreak of the virus. The Roosevelt's crew began returning to the ship in late April after spending a month either in quarantine or isolation in Guam, but sailors in early May began showing symptoms of the virus, such as cough and fever, despite testing negative twice. Now, that's more concerning because they are showing symptoms as well, although I guess did the article about South Korea indicate that the people who were testing positive after recovering, that all they said was that they weren't capable of passing the virus on to others, but it didn't say whether they were suffering the symptoms when they tested positive a second time. Let's see where this story goes. Some of the sailors who returned to the ship showed expanded symptoms, including body aches and headaches, and it's bad. It'll take you out of work, right? According to one official, this has slowed the move back onto the ship, as you might imagine it would, as all sailors who returned must have been symptom-free for 3 days and have tested negative twice, as well as completed their isolation period. So, I mean, really, they're doing everything that they can to clean things up, and the virus just keeps complicating the situation somehow, for whatever reason. CNN first reported Thursday that 5 sailors had tested positive after reboarding the ship, so the new number means the positive cases have more than doubled. The 13 COVID-positive sailors have been removed from the ship and are back in isolation on U.S. Naval Base Guam, according to officials. This week, they announced the fact here in this statement, and then go on to say the ship remains on the road to recovery and will prepare to get back underway once a critical mass of crew with the required expertise is on board. At the end of April, when the Navy stopped releasing daily totals, the number of active cases hit 1,102. As of Thursday, I guess last Thursday, more than 2,900 sailors had moved aboard the Roosevelt. More than a quarter of all sailors who have tested positive for COVID-19 are now recovered, according to the Navy. In addition to the outbreak, the Roosevelt now has a new medical problem. One sailor is diagnosed with tuberculosis and removed from the ship. Tuberculosis, as you know, is maybe not know. It's a bacterial infection that affects the lungs and carries symptoms similar to COVID-19, such as coughing, fever, and difficulty breathing. You don't want it at the same time as it. Well, you don't want it ever. TB, it is noted, kills 1.5 million people per year worldwide, more than any other infectious disease. So, welcome aboard. That's terrific. Scary news there, but, maybe not so bad in the end to find out about these 13 testing positive again, except that if they're experiencing symptoms, that's no good. I'm glad that they can't pass it on to the rest or to anybody else, supposedly, according to the Korean study, although I think maybe they need to get together with the Koreans and decide if they're really looking at the same phenomenon here. But if it takes you out of work, that's not so fantastic either in terms of reopening the economy, because the people who are supposed to do the work of reopening the economy will call and say, I can't come to work, boss. And, for now, I doubt very much whether the boss will say, that's okay, come to work sick, because I read in South Korea they're saying that people who are positive again, but I don't know how they're doing with respect to symptoms, can't spread it, so just come into work and cough all over everything. And then all the people who are coming into our restaurant or into our shop will see you coughing all over the place. And we'll say, don't worry about it. In a study of 250 patients in South Korea, you see. Yeah, and I don't know if that's going to convince anybody to stay in the restaurant. But whatever. I just thought we'd round up that news. Okay, there's much more. In non-COVID-19 news, but also disastrous bad news, we'll add the CNN report of the news that broke the other day. The FBI finds an Al-Qaeda link after breaking encryption on the Pensacola attacker's iPhone. You all remember the Pensacola naval base shooting? Was it a naval base? Well, military base of some kind. It's all we lose it in the haze of all the things that have gone horribly wrong under the Trump administration. David Shortell and Evan Perez of CNN reporting this news. To refresh your memory with the facts about the case, the Saudi military trainee who killed 3 U.S. sailors and wounded several others in a terror attack last year on a military base in Pensacola, Florida. You probably forgot about this in the wake of all the other things that have gone terribly wrong. Impeachment, coronavirus, pandemic, whatever. Comments about morbid obesity. Well, anyway, as it turns out, this Saudi military trainee was a longtime associate of Al-Qaeda who had communicated with operatives from the group as recently as the night before the shooting, the Justice Department and the FBI announced Monday. The problem with that, of course, being, one, there was, if true, it means there was an Al-Qaeda attack on a military base in Florida, and that's bad news. And the other difficulty is, hey, I don't know if the FBI or the Justice Department is to be trusted, so I don't know what to tell you. Parts of it still seem to be operating more or less as usual, or there was as in previous administrations, I guess, as usual. Other parts of it seem to be being manipulated politically by Attorney General Barr and possibly directly by the president if you think he's capable of doing such things. U.S. investigators uncovered the Al-Qaeda connection after the FBI broke through the encryption protecting the Saudi attackers' iPhones and have been able to use the information on devices to carry out a recent counterterrorism operation in Yemen. Attorney General William Barr and FBI Director Christopher Wray said at a news conference, and that also will raise some red flags when the name of Yemen comes up here. Is it real? He certainly could have had terrorist links. I mean, why else do you just suddenly start shooting up a naval base? But are the connections with, who would the connections have to be with in order for the Trump administration to be able to claim some sort of victory? If it was ISIS, of course, that, ordinarily you would say, oh yeah, let's associate it with ISIS. But remember, Trump has declared himself the victor in the war against ISIS, so it can't be ISIS. It's going to have to go back to Al-Qaeda in order to ring bells with the American people and make them scared of terrorism and help us help the Saudis justify a, let's say, bombing operation in Yemen. It's all possible. It's just difficult to know what's really underneath all of this stuff. That's the damage that Donald Trump has done to our system. The evidence we've been able to develop from the killer's devices show that the Pensacola attack was actually the brutal culmination of years of planning and preparation by a long-time AQAP associate. That's Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, right? That's according to Chris Wray, referring to Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, one of the deadliest branches of the terror group. I think they're all pretty deadly. Mohammed al-Shamrani. I think I got that right. That's the member of the Royal Saudi Air Force who had been training at the Naval Air Station Pensacola, who was killed by law enforcement during the attack. I mean, it does make it a little difficult to think of it as the culmination of years of planning and preparation. He shot 3 sailors, and what did they say? I don't remember what the total was, but it feels like they should have gotten more out of years of planning, but I'm glad they didn't. But it actually makes me think that it really wasn't the culmination of years of planning at all. The officials stopped short of saying that al-Shamrani had been directed by the terror group, but said his ties to the AQAP began as far back as 2015 and were significant. The connection between the group and the attack marked a major development in the U.S. fight against terrorism, did it? Since 9/11, no foreign terrorist organization had successfully directed a deadly attack in the U.S., according to New America, a think tank. That's the major development is we lost, I guess, on that particular fight. That's an interesting way of putting it. By the way, the fact that I guess it took them so long to break the encryption on his iPhone you would expect lead to something like this, and here it is. The officials also used the opportunity to hammer Apple for refusing to help investigators break into the devices. Wray said that the FBI received effectively no help from Apple in bypassing the phones, and that third-party technology firms were also unable to help the investigators. Well, that's two different things. If they think Apple could have helped but refused to, versus there's nothing we can do, we don't know how to break our own encryption. I don't know. But third-party, unable, but Apple, they suck for whatever reason. The fix that the FBI was able to develop for al-Shamrani's phones is not a fix for our broader Apple problem, as he puts it, calling it a pretty limited application. Barr called it a great disappointment that Apple had refused to help investigators. Apple has made it a business and marketing decision to design its phones in a way that only the user can unlock the contents no matter what the circumstances. In cases like this, where the user is a terrorist, or in other cases where the user is a violent criminal, a human trafficker, a child predator, Apple's decision has dangerous consequences for the public safety and the national security, and it is my judgment unacceptable, Barr said, which is interesting because, of course, there are other circumstances in which there are dangerous consequences for public safety and national security, in which Barr and the president and others are screwing up horribly and killing 100,000 Americans, but whatever. It's an open question what to do about encryption on devices like this. Al-Shamrani apparently was meticulous in his planning, Ray said, and had been coordinating planning and tactics with the operatives ahead of the attack. Al-Shamrani also wrote a final will purporting to explain himself that he had saved on his phone, but then no one could read it because it was blocked by encryption. So how good was that? How much planning really went into that? The will was later released by AQAP when they claimed credit for the attack, Ray said. So I guess maybe he emailed it to them. Unless AQAP could have broken the encryption on the phone, but refused for some reason to help the American government do it. Gee whiz. No, I'm just kidding. I'm sure they sent it to them. An interesting development to say, well, really, honestly, to say the most about it. It doesn't really help us unravel anything we didn't guess initially. It may or may not pay off politically for Barr and the president and Chris Wray. We'll have to wait and see. But now, time for a short break. So we'll do it. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, let's see. Another story I need to update you on just after the end of the show yesterday, on which during which we mentioned the latest Inspector General purging, the Inspector General of the State Department having, the president giving notice of 30 days of intent to dismiss him from his job and something, etc., but basically amounts to his being fired from the job. And we learned that he was, the IG was in the middle of investigating or launching an investigation into the demands by Secretary Pompeo and his wife, apparently, to make use of political appointee employees at the State Department to perform personal services for them, which is, it's a highly corrupt thing to be doing. But par for the course, certainly for Trump people, but they should all be fired for that and, probably later imprisoned. We'll discuss that at some future date. But as it turns out, there is something worse. And I think Greg Sargent was one of the first ones on this story, and he wrote it up in the Plum Line yesterday. Trump's purge just got much more corrupt. Here's what's coming next. Greg tells us the president's abrupt decision to remove the Inspector General of the State Department constitutes the latest in a string of corrupt efforts to remove public servants who prioritize real oversight and accountability over protecting Trump at all costs. But in the case of Trump's termination of Steve Linick, the State Department IG, this could end up looking far worse than we know. There's a backstory here that has not yet gotten scrutiny, one that could make the firing appear even more corrupt. House Democrats have discovered that the fired IG had mostly completed an investigation into Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's widely criticized decision to skirt Congress with an emergency declaration to approve billions of dollars in arms sales to Saudi Arabia last year. Aides on the Foreign Affairs Committee tell me, and of course I wonder whether that has anything to do with the announcement about breaking the Pensacola shooter's phone's encryption, in that, it's already led to counterterrorism operations in Yemen, which were probably conducted with weapons among the billions of dollars worth of arms that we approved, or that Pompeo approved despite the disapproval of Congress, for sale to Saudi Arabia, for instance. Anyway, I don't know if they're definitely got that kind. Even that connection is rather, indirect anyway. So even if it happens to be true, there's more to it though. Let's see. I have learned that there may be another reason for Mr. Linick's firing. Representative Elliot Engel, Democrat of New York and chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, said in a statement to Greg, his office was investigating, at my request, Trump's phony declaration of an emergency so he could send weapons to Saudi Arabia. Another phony use of emergency declarations that Trump's not entitled to use under these circumstances, but unlocking broad powers for him that were originally reserved for presidents who would actually make a declaration of emergency with factual foundation. Committee Democrats have also learned that the State Department was recently briefed on the IG's conclusion that in that investigation, aides say, and they don't know what role this investigation and its conclusions played in Linick's removal, if any. But the committee is now trying to establish what those conclusions were and what links they might have to the firing, the aides confirm. We don't have the full picture yet, but it's troubling that Secretary Pompeo wanted Mr. Linick pushed out before this work could be completed, Engel said in the statement to Greg Sargent. The White House has confirmed Linick's firing came at Pompeo's request. So there's that, at least. Trump claimed he no longer has confidence in Linick. So what? But anyway, a thin justification that highlights Trump's purging of officials exercising oversight on his administration. Many news organizations have reported that the fired IG had been examining charges that Pompeo had been directing a staffer to run errands for him. Some reported that Pompeo was undertaking abuses of taxpayer funds, including frequent visits to his home state of Kansas. It's unclear whether these are linked to Linick's firing, but the fact that Linick has also mostly completed an investigation into the decision to fast-track arms to the Saudis adds another layer to this whole story. Dems on the Foreign Affairs Committee and its Senate counterpart have launched an investigation into the firing. In letters to the State Department and the White House, they demanded documents be preserved and raised the possibility that the firing may have been an illegal act of retaliation against an unspecified ongoing IG investigation into Pompeo. Importantly, the Dems are also demanding a full accounting of any and all IG investigations into Pompeo that are ongoing and thus could have been the basis for the firing. One of these IG investigations, it turns out, is into Pompeo's fast-tracking of arms sales to the Saudis. Although, honestly, that makes it sound like a more scattershot approach. We want to know why he was fired, so we demand you preserve any documents about any investigations that he might have been doing. Could be something undiscovered that's even bigger. That turns out to be the next real reason, or they may have hit it on the head with this one, or it might have been about the personal errands, or all of them, or some combination. I don't know. But, this makes it sound a lot more definite than it really is in terms of what proof they can offer at this point. Now, of course, it becomes the mission of the State Department and Trump loyalists to hide, destroy, or otherwise obfuscate as much of the evidence that will prove this allegation as possible. So what about this deal? Here's a backgrounder on that in Greg's piece. In the spring of 2019, the Trump administration pushed through a plan for more than $8 billion in weapons sales, almost entirely to Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. MBS and MBZ, in other words. It employed an emergency declaration that, under the law, supposedly allowed it to proceed without the statutorily required 30-day period during which Congress must be formally notified, and has the option of voting to block the sale. So the law gives the Congress that opportunity, but it's waivable with an emergency declaration. But like most such laws, there are supposed to have been understandings in place about what it takes to make such an emergency declaration. The president's not supposed to just sign a document that lies like crazy, but says emergency declaration at the top, and that's the end of the questions. But, we gave ourselves no serious enforcement mechanism because it was imagined at the time that the law was drafted that the president wouldn't be willing to simply lie his ass off just to get whatever thrill he wanted in the moment. But as it turns out, that is an actual problem for actual presidents. This one in particular. The move was condemned, of course, by lawmakers in both parties who have increasingly been turning on continued U.S. support for the Saudi-led war in Yemen, which stretches back to the last administration and has unleashed a humanitarian catastrophe. Congress subsequently voted to block the arms sale with some Republican support, but Trump vetoed the effort. At the time, the House Foreign Affairs Committee asked Linick to launch an investigation of the State Department's and Pompeo's handling of the arms sales. In their demand for an investigation, committee Dems argued that the administration had failed to provide adequate justification for the emergency declaration. They noted that one core claim, the threat from Iran required it, appeared to be a pretext, since the House had not been told by Pompeo of the need for the sale in a briefing on Iran only days before. Sounds like they made it up. The Democrats also raised questions about potential conflicts of interest surrounding a former State Department official who may have been obligated to recuse himself of involvement in the sale, given his previous role as a lobbyist for Raytheon, which made many of the weapons involved in the transfer. In recent days, aides tell me the committee has been informed by State Department officials that the IG's investigation is mostly complete and that the IG's office briefed state officials on its preliminary findings. A spokesman for Pompeo did not immediately return an email requesting comment. Now, as part of the Dems' demand for a full accounting of all investigations the IG had been running, they also want an accounting of what the IG found in its investigation of the arms sales. The administration should comply, Engel told me. Oh well, they won't. Senator Robert Menendez of New Jersey, the ranking Dem on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, obliquely alluded to an ongoing IG investigation into the arms sales on NBC News. He noted that IGs are being massacred on Friday night for doing their job. To reiterate, we don't know what the IG found on the arms sales, and it's possible there's no connection between that and his firing, but at a minimum, the firing of Linick coming after the removal of numerous other IGs already shows Trump's efforts to purge the government of oversight and accountability on his administration are getting much worse. And the timing here demands a full accounting of what the IG found on the arms sales and any possible connection to his firing. Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, who joined Menendez in advocating for Senate efforts to block the arms sales, pointed to the administration's coziness with the Saudis, which had included a refusal to hold the royal family accountable over the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, and asked why Trump wouldn't use these arms sales to exercise leverage to get them to change their behavior. Everybody's been trying to figure out why this relationship between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia is so strangely close, Murphy told me. If Linick found out the reason, then Congress needs to know. Well, it's a lot of supposition, but probably true, just given the way the Trump administration seems to work and the way the Saudi government, such as it is, seems to work. We've all thought for a long time that there was something odd about how close they were, and maybe this will help us find out. All right, there's more other stories to cover, and perhaps we'll even discuss this one a little bit further with Joan if we hear from her in the next segment and a half or so of today's show. Let's see, other things that I wanted to share with you. There's plenty of reaction to the stupid attempt at launching the Obamagate story. That certainly seemed odd. Let's alert you to this report in the New York Times from over the weekend. Feds suspect vast fraud network is targeting U.S. unemployment systems. This is a bad time, of course, to have that happening, as so many people are unemployed and looking for help in making ends meet in the middle of the pandemic as well. And apparently, a lot of people are missing out on getting the benefits in a timely fashion. And the United States Department of Labor says part of the problem may be that, it says investigators see evidence of a sophisticated international attack they said could siphon hundreds of millions of dollars that were intended for the unemployed. What a terrible time to have it happen. But of course, it's about the time you would expect something like this to happen, when there's an unprecedented amount of money in the system and an unprecedented number of claims being made by Americans all over the country. I guess this is the sort of thing that Republicans certainly would insist that this was ripe for fraud anyway, just because there's so many claimants and so much money that has to be made available because there are so many claimants. But the accusation here is not people, Americans filing for fraudulently for benefits, but of a foreign power, not clear whether it's state connected or not, essentially looking to exploit the weaknesses of the system. Mike Baker reporting this for the New York Times over the weekend. A group of international fraudsters appears to have mounted an immense, sophisticated attack on U.S. unemployment systems, creating a network that has already siphoned millions of dollars in payments that were intended to avert an economic collapse. Too late for that, according to federal authorities. The attackers have used detailed information about U.S. citizens, such as social security numbers that may have been obtained from cyber hacks of years past, to file claims on behalf of people who have not been laid off, officials said. The attack has exploited state unemployment systems at a time when they are straining to process a crush of claims from an unemployment crisis unmatched since the Great Depression. I think here, long story short, is the system is under enormous pressure to get money to people as quickly as possible, because we know how difficult the job losses have been and how difficult the pandemic has made things. And in the rush to move these things out, there's a weakness. And that includes, hackers and attackers of various stripes taking the Social Security and other identifying information that they've managed to steal over the years and file false claims. And I guess now that you can route the money directly to bank accounts with direct deposit, they set up fake accounts that they control under other people's names, make claims for unemployment. The money gets sent to those accounts and they drain it out. In the meantime, that also makes it difficult to get to processing real claims. They're later on that, and then who knows what happens to the money. But that's a good scam. I mean, don't do it, but criminally brilliant anyway. With many states rushing to pay claims, the article continues, payments have gone straight to direct deposit accounts. In Washington state, the agency tasked with managing unemployment claims there began realizing the extent of the problem in recent days when still employed people called to question why they had received confirmation paperwork in mail. So their snail mail shows up and says, we direct deposited your unemployment check. Go get it. Didn't we do a great job? It's awesome. And they're like, hey, I didn't lose my job, which is, I guess it's good that they report it. A lot of people would be like, hey, cool, free money. But then I guess once they realize, hey, no free money, it's not in my bank, then they are tipped off. Maybe I ought to tell the government about this. This is a gut punch, said Susie Levine, or Levine, depending on our pronunciation here, the commissioner of Washington State's Employment Security Department. Anyone know how she says it? Anyway, in a memo obtained by the New York Times, investigators from the U.S. Secret Service, they're never busy, said that they had information suggesting that the scheme was coming from a well-organized Nigerian fraud ring. Right? You might have suspected Russia or even Iran or Macedonians for this one. This, it is suspected, comes from a Nigerian fraud ring. I wonder if that prince that I was supposed to help out with his finances was involved in that. Well, it could also result in potential losses in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So you can see it'd be worth doing if you were a criminal. Roy Dotson, D-O-T-S-O-N, the special agent who specializes in financial fraud at the Secret Service, said in an interview investigators were still working to pinpoint who was involved and exactly where they were. We are actively running down every lead we are getting, Mr. Dotson said. He also said it appears the fraud was being aided by a substantial number of mules. People who are often in the United States, not mules at all, they're people in the United States, very often, who were used as intermediaries for money laundering after making connections with fraudsters online. He warned people to be wary of quick money job offers or other suspicious financial arrangements. The Secret Service memo said Washington State had emerged as the primary target thus far, but there was also evidence of attacks in Florida, Massachusetts, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Rhode Island, and Wyoming. The agency warned that every state was vulnerable and could be targeted, noting that the attackers appeared to have extensive records of personally identifiable information. We have an acronym for that now, PII. All right. It is assumed, well, I guess not an acronym, but that's the abbreviation. PII, personally identifiable information. It is assumed the fraud ring behind this possesses a substantial PII database to submit the volume of applications observed thus far, the memo said. Rhode Island State Police reported on Monday that it had received numerous reports of suspected fraud related to unemployment benefits. Scott Jensen, the director of Rhode Island's Department of Labor and Training, said Saturday that it could be hard to distinguish between a legitimate claim and a fraudulent one when imposters provided the proper information. He said the fraudulent cases that were emerging seemed to have their paperwork in order, without the hallmarks of other times when claims might have mistakes or other indicators that they weren't genuine. Whoever it is seems to be fairly sophisticated and good with what they're doing, Mr. Jensen said. So congratulations to the Nigerians for getting their act together, I guess. He did not know whether it was a group of international actors, but was hopeful investigators would get to the bottom of the fraud. Hey, that is a great statement. I'm hopeful for that too. In the meantime, he said, the state is clamping down and taking a closer look at claims surrounding specific banks. That might help. Ms. Levine, or Levine, she's capitalized the L and the V in this, so let's say Levine, said she did not want to put a number on the losses so far in Washington State, but believed it was in the millions of dollars. The state is working with law enforcement agencies to try and reclaim some of the funds. Some workplaces also had been hit particularly hard. At Western Washington University in Bellingham, Washington, more than 400 out of about 2,500 total employees had been targeted with fraudulent claims. Paul, either Cock or Coke, here, C-O-C-K-E. How do you like that? An E on the end. That's the university's spokesman. So interesting. So I guess what that means is that at some point, Western Washington University had its employee PPI database stolen, or at least a good portion of it, or maybe it was several years ago and only 400 out of the 2,000 files they stole are still working at the university, maybe something like that. The state has been inundated with calls from people and businesses asking about unemployment notifications that have been sent to them. I imagine some people probably opened the mail and said, I've been fired? I didn't even know it yet. They have flooded a hotline and have forced the state to hire more people to answer the phones. So that's partial solution to the unemployment problem, but only a tiny fraction of it. One of those who filed the complaint, Anna Zivarts, a Seattle resident who works at the nonprofit Disability Rights Washington, said she found a series of official envelopes from the government in her mail on May 8th. At first, she worried that she might owe taxes. Then, when she opened the mail, she had another worry. I called my boss and said, am I getting laid off and I just don't know about it? But her boss assured her that she was still employed. Ms. Zivarts said she then called and emailed to flag the issue for the state, but did not hear back. Her employer has also notified the state. More than 1 million people in Washington state have filed unemployment claims amid the economic turmoil brought on by the coronavirus pandemic. Remember that? Around the country, the numbers have reached more than 36 million in the past 2 months. Unemployment programs have delivered billions of dollars in payments. States may be particularly vulnerable as they work to rush payments to people who have lost their jobs. Many states have long built in lengthy reviews to help weed out fraudulent claims, but as more people have suddenly become eligible and the need for speedy payments becomes urgent, some states have tried to eliminate those delays. Let's get rid of red tape, right? Remember that we have this red tape allegedly to prevent waste, fraud, and abuse. And then, of course, we say, oh my gosh, let's get rid of the red tape. And what returns? Waste, fraud, and abuse. Well, at least we know that they were working once. As with many other states, Washington's typical week-long waiting period before unemployment payments are paid has been reduced. Federal funding has expanded unemployment benefits to workers who were not previously qualified as well. There's a dire need to get money out quickly, Ms. Levine said. This makes us an attractive target for fraudsters. People who need jobless benefits have reported delays and challenges in getting their applications approved. Ms. Levine said the state was working to resolve delayed claims while trying to strike a balance between scrutiny and streamlining. That's a tough balance. Apparently they've lost in this one. Washington State has some of the highest weekly benefits amounts. Maybe that's why they've been targeted. Federal law has provided an additional $600 a week for the next few months. Unemployed workers can also get retroactive payments. U.S. Attorney Brian T. Moran in Seattle said his office was working with other agencies to track down and prosecute the people submitting false claims. That's a great idea. But he also said the state needed to address and fix vulnerabilities in their system. Ms. Levine said the unemployment agency was monitoring trends and using them to try and identify suspicious cases before payments were issued. Also a good idea. The state has also implemented a 2-day delay in payments to give workers more time to vet the claims. So, very interesting. Also, by the way, I just want to throw out there, I did see some of the more suspicious minds among our Twitter friends saying, wouldn't that be terrific cover for an operation of the of Trump cronies looking to siphon off billions of dollars from the unemployment system, and say the Nigerians are doing it. 400-pound Nigerian on a bed somewhere. Look over there. Check that out. It also would be a fantastic cover for Russian mobsters to be doing it, to somehow plant the story that it was Nigerians and you should look elsewhere. I don't know. That's all just pure speculation. It could absolutely be exactly as reported. It is a fantastic fraud target. Billions of dollars being crammed into a system with enormous pressure to put it out the other end to millions of brand new claimants who, anybody could be unemployed at this point. There's no time to check into these things. It was built for exploitation. Whether it was the Nigerians who figured it out or not, we may never know. I don't know. But it was an interesting thought. It was a fun thought to entertain in dark gallows humor kind of a way in the middle of a disaster, to think that, oh yeah, that's probably Trump and Steve Mnuchin and Jared Kushner stealing all the money. I don't think they're capable of doing it, but not that they wouldn't try it if they were. I just think, I don't know how they are with tech, but Jared's rumored to be great with the tech, right? Speaking of Jared, I will cram this one in before we leave for our third break and get into our final segment. I did see our friend NYC Southpaw tweeting the other day the comment on this. This is the most Jared stuff, crap, using the S word, the vile S word. This is the most Jared I've ever seen. And here's a fun story for you from the Seattle Times. Federal shipment of Q-tip style coronavirus swabs puzzle Washington state officials. We really do have to do long story short on this one, as our next break is coming up. Let me get all the pop-ups out of the way and tell you what went on here. Basically, looks like the state of Washington, once again, we're stuck in Washington here, needed more swabs to conduct those coronavirus tests that they're under such pressure from the federal government and, of course, the citizenry at large to conduct to try to get a handle on these things. And in order to do that, you've seen on TV, they need those long swabs to get the nasal swab, they enter through the nose to get, what is it, they're like mid-respiratory system. They got to go all the way back in there. So what'd they get when they asked Jared Kushner and his Airbridge folks in FEMA to send them more swabs urgently? They basically got a box of Q-tips, too short and not even individually sterile packaged. Amazing. It is pretty Jared, isn't it? Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday. But our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Netroots Radio. So I think that's the long story short on that one, but some of the details are pretty interesting. Like I said, Seattle Times reporting this, Louis Camb, the Seattle Times staff reporter on it. But yes, when you get those swabs that you need for the coronavirus tests, you'll see the long ones, usually with the wooden stem to it. I don't know what those things are, probably like a foot long, maybe a little bit less. It looks like, and instead they got essentially a box of Q-tips. Now, the interesting part about that, in addition to getting the wrong stuff, and it is very Jared, right? You need swabs. What's that? Like Q-tips? Send them a box of Q-tips. They didn't send the Q-tip brand. Shouldn't blame them for it. But there was some confusion. They ordered these swabs, and what they got was dozens of boxes marked "Comforts for Baby" cotton swabs, packed with what appeared to be thousands of Q-tips, although they don't appear to me to be Q-tips. Q-tips, of course, have cotton on both sides. I don't know if that's a proprietary thing or not, but these have cotton only on one side, so they're pretty cheap and cheesy as it is. Now, it comes in the same long box that you very often see Q-tips in, and I guess, if you look at it, I guess the box, well, anyway, they called up, right, and they said, hey, this is not what we asked for, these boxes of Q-tips is not what we're, and they said, oh, don't worry about it. The guy says, I guess this is the guy. The guy is Reed Schuler, senior advisor to the governor there, Jay Inslee. He called the White House Coronavirus Task Force. Hey, Jared, I asked, they didn't say he was talking to Jared, what exactly is this shipment we're getting? And they said, oh, sorry, ignore the packaging. You were supposed to get a memo explaining that shipment, Schuler said Friday. So I guess they hadn't opened them up yet. Maybe they were wrapped in plastic, right? And I guess you could say, so I guess what they told him was, ignore the packaging. It says the packaging used, that is the Comforts for Baby cotton swabs, right? This is the memo that they got from U.S. Cotton LLC. The task force sends on this memo from U.S. Cotton LLC, the manufacturer, explaining the swabs actually were produced specifically for nasal specimen collection. Okay, that's good. That's what we need them for, right? The packaging used, Comforts for Baby, right, for a portion of the initial FEMA production does not accurately reflect the contents. The memo, signed by company president and CEO John B. Nims, said. Be assured that the printed packaging does contain the FDA-approved sterilized polyester spun swab for specimen collection of COVID-19. You say, Okay, so what they were saying was, look, we ramped up production of the specialized swabs that you need. The boxes we have to ship them in we're laying around for our usual product, Comforts for Baby cotton swabs. But we just used the boxes. Don't worry about it. Oh, okay. So you look at them and, it's an elongated box. All right. So usually the Q-tips are packed, I guess what you might call horizontally in this thing. They're short. And what's a Q-tip box, like, 5 inches wide, maybe 6, I don't know, and like a foot long. So, there's like, the packaging here says 180 swabs in there, whatever. So you figure, all right, they're packed like Q-tips. Maybe we'll open them up, and they laid them vertically with long swabs, the long way rather than short way across as they do with regular cotton swabs. Open them up, and what's in there? Well, there's a picture, and it looks pretty much like Q-tips except with cotton, or as they say, spun polyester, but apparently it looks like cotton to me, on one side and laid horizontally across side to side, just like Q-tips that they feared they might be in a box. But they were assured, no. The packaging ignored the packaging. So when the swabs arrived in Washington, 22,000 in bulk, packed into the scores of mislabeled boxes. Well, when they arrived, they puzzled state health workers. The nasopharyngeal, or NP, that's a helpful abbreviation. The NP and nasal swabs widely used for specimen collection. Typically, though, right, in addition to not being the right size, they typically come, individually wrapped, let's say, in sterile packaging to avoid contamination. But nope, not the case here. Just like opening a regular old store-bought box of Q-tips. I think keeping the stuff sterile is going to be extraordinarily important, and I can't imagine a more troubling packaging, a more troubling scene than a drive-through coronavirus testing situation with the workers all geared up in their PPE and face masks and shields and gloves and aprons and everything. And they're supposed to be reaching with contaminated gloved hands back into this little box of Q-tips every time and remove a new one. None of them in sterile packaging. Obviously, they can't use them at all. Having boxes full of swabs in bulk raises questions about sterility and whether we can use them at all, Schuler said. The state must now conduct quality assurance tests before determining whether and how it can use the swabs to enhance its coronavirus testing, even though they're so short, right? I mean, I guess with some of the new tests you can use shorter swabs, but can you use these? That could involve taking laborious steps to individually package each swab before distribution. No, they're not going to do that. What Schuler described as just another obstacle in a wild saga to expand testing. Anyone who wants to test can get a test. All right. In addition to all this, the surprise shipment marks the latest wrinkle in the Trump administration's promise for more testing supplies that has fallen far short of the state's expectations, Inslee's office has said. In late April, the administration pledged to supply the state with weekly shipments totaling 580,000 medical testing-grade nasal swabs in May and June, but so far Washington has received only about 60,000 halfway through May, roughly 10% of the amount that Admiral Brett Giroir, if we're pronouncing his name correctly, had actually promised. All right. Time to answer the phones now on Joan McCarter. Good morning, Joan. How you doing?
I am fine. How are you?
I'm fine as well. So far, so good. Just reading a little bit about the substandard testing equipment being distributed around the country. That's good news. So, a box of Q-tips that got sent to Washington State so they could test everybody.
Open box of Q-tips, and which
nice.
everybody, yeah.
This is going to be so
Q-tips,
so cute and just fantastic. And I imagine if you, I know you got to get, well, in the old test anyway. Maybe the new test you don't need as long a swab, but if you do, you got real problems. Like maybe they can tie a string to the back.
They can scotch tape a bunch of them together.
Right. Oh, tie it to one of Trump's ties. That might be long enough to get in there. So just another of those situations in which, I don't know, Jared Kushner's friends said, I have Q-tips, pay me $1 million. And I guess that solved the situation. But anyone who wants a test can get one. They just might lose the swab in you while they're going for it.
But we don't need him anymore anyway because we're back, baby.
Right, that's
the economy's surging.
Yes, they are
this
surging.
This is the new line from the White House.
Right. There are some innovative new attempts at social distancing I noticed out there in some states that are reopening. Have you seen the bumper tables?
I have not seen the bumper tables.
I think this was in Ocean City, Maryland. I saw one of the outdoor cafes and bars as enforcing social distancing. The customers come. This is actually a fun idea, and will get people to go, I think. But it's a sort of a wearable device that serves as your table. I don't know how to describe it. You kind of have to see pictures. But basically, it's like putting on a giant inner tube with some sort of harness that keeps it on you, and something inside the inner rim of the tube in between you and the tube itself that serves as a table, essentially. And the idea is you're walking around with this enormous bulbous thing on you, and they can put your drink on the table material in there, but you can't get close to other people because you'll bump into their table.
That is fun.
And
I like that idea very much.
Quite honestly, near genius, and will get people who are maybe considering going out and who think maybe it'll be okay if we can just maintain social distancing. Here's a fun way to do it. You might get sick anyway, as people bump into you and then sneeze on your table or the cup that's on your table as they partially spill your drink. But you'll have a good time doing it. So these are the sorts of innovations I think we need to draw the consumer back out there. But we've given up anything like that here in Idaho. No, we're back. Nobody here is. Oh, okay. Well,
it's very scary. We have
those sumo
bike
seats.
bars. Is this a thing in other parts of the country?
Bike bars. We have a biker bar. That's a different thing.
They are movable bars where. A dozen people, 8 to a dozen people, pedal along. You're sitting. It's a rectangular bicycle, great big bicycle with tables, and you're sitting at the bar, pedaling.
Yeah.
This I don't think I could handle because you're pedaling forward but moving sideways as you're sitting.
Yes, right.
And then the guy in front on the bike part. That's steering. Anyway, we have these in Boise everywhere. They're exceedingly annoying, and they're back.
Okay. They don't keep you healthy, and normally, I guess it's good for cardio.
Well, you're exercising while you're drinking.
Yeah, sort of. Right. So there is that, and maybe you burn the calories, do a little cardio. No social distancing.
No, it's not going to. Moving while you're drinking does not mean you're not being exposed to coronavirus.
Right. In fact, it means you're maybe spraying it around town while you're going and getting drunker and less responsible along the way.
Yes.
But maybe you're drinking juice. I don't know.
But it means that we're back, and so Trump says we're fine.
Boise.
We're fine. Everything's open. We're back up. And that means the White House is saying, no, we don't need more stimulus.
Oh, all right. Why would they want more money out there?
Because if they say we need more stimulus, that means Trump is wrong and that this disaster isn't over.
Yeah, well, I guess so. I mean, have they considered saying, no, we always said we needed more stimulus? That is a possibility. If they do need it, they should just switch to that. But I will say it does make me want to visit Boise. I mean, would you take me on one of those bikes if it was healthy, if we were all healthy?
If we could get enough of our friends together so it was people I knew and liked and not.
Yeah. Oh,
they're very popular with as hen parties, as they say in Great Britain, bachelorettes.
Oh, okay, yes.
You see a lot of those, and it's mostly very, very drunk 20-something people who are very loud.
Yeah, well, that's
impeding traffic and.
Sure.
But yeah, fun.
Yeah, I think so. I think I've seen him on TV. I think they may have him in various other cities. Boise wasn't on the list, but a good call for Boise. Under better circumstances, I may go, but now disease, getting on planes. I could walk. I could bike if I could get one of these bikes. I'd bike there. But then what would be the point? I already have one.
A whole bunch of your friends.
Yeah, I haven't thought this through. But okay, that's good news. I'll take that. That's a moment of levity otherwise in the darkness. But
it's a bit dark.
Yeah. Okay.
Republicans can't say to Trump, we think maybe you're wrong. We think maybe, we do need a little bit more stimulus. Because Trump says no. So we're not getting an immediate vote in the Senate on the HEROES Act that passed in the House last week.
Yeah.
We may not be getting one at all.
Well,
and, based on the economic advice of Kevin Hassett, who you might remember from a few weeks ago, who had the Excel spreadsheet chart that he came up with that said COVID deaths would be down to zero by mid-May.
The cubic fit guy, that I remember.
Yeah, him.
Is that a thing? I don't know. I never heard of that before. But yeah, he's missed the mark on the 0 deaths, I note, for the record, in case you hadn't noticed. It's actually quite a few more than 0. All right, so it's his economic advice that motivates
in
Trump
large
to say,
part, he's saying, no, things are pretty darn great.
Well, when they
we
were
really
0.
don't need more stimulus. So there you go.
Gosh, that's wrong. I don't know. Well, that's bad news. We'll see whether, I guess there's no reason to believe that Republicans would cross him on that. And I don't know whether he would go so far as to say, well, I would veto that. That would be interesting. To make
he has said he would veto the HEROES Act.
All right. Well, that's pretty amazing. And it also is just bad news in general, not only because we wouldn't be getting the help we need, but just sort of another, when they put together the other previous packages and things were left out and they say, well, we'll get to that in the next package. Well, how do you know there's going to be a next? Oh, everyone knows there's going to be a next package. How could there not be? So here we are. Maybe with nothing. Okay.
Yeah.
So where do we stand with
We hope that there's a next package. We desperately need a next package. Now that we're opening up, we're going to see a lot more people getting sick.
Yeah.
And a lot more people dying, and businesses having to probably close again. Because all of their workers will be sick. It's just, there's no way we're not going to need more stimulus. There's no way the stimulus that was passed previously is going to do the trick, particularly since even the slush fund, the $500 billion slush fund that they came up with in March in the CARES Act, that money hasn't been spent. Treasury is still fiddling around with how they want to do it, how they're going to write the rules to make sure that it goes to the people that they want it to go to, the people who are already rich, and doesn't make it out to actual small and medium-sized businesses that need it.
Yeah, that one got used up pretty quick, too. And
so
there's another one that didn't get out.
The separate Small Business Administration loans didn't go where the need was greatest. And we haven't seen a lot of reporting from the second round, the 3.5 phase bill, the interim bill, whatever, the last thing that Republicans want to do. We haven't seen how that's playing out yet. Not a lot of reporting on how the Small Business Administration is doing in loaning that out, but we are not seeing the horror stories of mega corporations getting it. So, I don't know.
That may yet happen, but we haven't seen it.
But the reality is, it's really not enough. Even what is in the HEROES Act probably isn't enough and is probably misdirected. Where we should have had $2,000 payments for everybody in the United States ongoing, we got $1,200 again per person.
Okay. Yeah, and
we should have had a Paycheck Guarantee Act like has been introduced in the House by Rep. Jayapal from Washington State that actually subsidizes, it's just grants to businesses to cover payroll.
Yeah, we'll get you through this.
We got more PPP money.
Yeah. They love formulas, Washington,
they love
D.C.
formulas.
does.
They love middlemen.
Yeah.
Somehow they feel that they've got to bring the banks in to make this work. They've got to have the banks as the go-between. They've got to put this out as loans. Because, you can't give away free money. It's got to be a loan.
Even
which,
though
a lot of small businesses aren't willing to take on more debt. They see this as a possibility, but then, if they can't meet the stringent rules of the PPP loans, this percentage has to go to payroll in the next 8 or 24 or whatever weeks. You can't use the majority of it for your rent, for your utilities, for your insurance, for your ongoing overhead costs. They see those restrictions, realize that it doesn't make sense for them, and don't want to take it on as debt. Whereas you give them a grant to cover most of their payroll, they can use whatever for covering the overhead, for covering utilities, for covering rent, for covering insurance.
It is interesting that you would get resistance and insistence on these kind of restrictions from people who were, like 10 minutes ago, the world's largest boosters of block grants with no restrictions of any kind for states or whatever else. But here, we don't trust America's
We're not talking
business.
Republicans in resistance to the idea of paycheck guarantee.
Okay, then.
It's Democrats.
Oh, that's a big problem.
That's a big problem.
Hey, why?
Nancy Pelosi promised big, big things in the HEROES Act and then had to dial it back.
So not, I mean, I had heard that complaint, obviously, but I'm surprised that paycheck guarantee is such an issue among Democrats. I can't wait now to be tweeted, "Why are you surprised?" by everybody who's up in arms about these things. But okay, but I am. I mean, why are you so happy about saying, "Why am I surprised?" Weren't you once surprised and then found out that you were dissatisfied with the way things were going? All right. That's interesting. Technocrats, I guess, is the big complaint. Love to make it formulaic and weird when it could just be, how much money are you spending now for how many people? All right, here. Have that.
Right. Have it as money.
That's a pretty good formula.
Have it as money. It's what Denmark did. 1 = 1. Denmark saw like a 0.04% increase in its unemployment rate because of the crisis.
Yeah. I mean,
we need to be like Denmark.
Yeah. Honestly, that was a pretty wise thing to do too, right? If you let the companies that have the payroll maintain the system, well, one, you don't overload your unemployment system, but two, if you okay, I can understand you distribute the same, let's say you distribute the same amount of money, and we do it this way. The unemployment office is adept at sending large amounts of checks to large amounts of people. They're not, but that's the idea. They're supposed to be. Fine. But then you have to report all those people as unemployed. And then what happens to your precious stock market or economy? I'm now reporting 20% unemployment. Whereas if you freeze everybody in place and give the money to the employers, they're not unemployed.
Right.
Huh. Hey. Why didn't we think
the
of that?
payroll systems of all of the businesses are taking care of it all. It's seamless. It's
in fact, they're even more adept.
Yes.
Republicans would certainly argue, well, private business is better at this. But okay, you said it wasn't their problem this time.
No.
Okay.
No, it was the moderate New Dems.
Well,
Who started listening to Republicans saying this is a Democratic wish list. It's their Christmas wish list. But the deficit.
I don't even understand the dynamics of this, but okay. I mean, I understand the political dynamics. I just don't understand why anybody would bring that up and listen and say, well, a good way to do it is, we're worried about the numbers. We're worried about the deficit. Let's add 15 hands to this chain. Because surely everyone will pass it on costlessly. I didn't learn anything about, what did they call those costs that happen when you have transactions back in economics? They should come up with an easy term for that. Okay, well, that's bad news. So
the reality is we're reopening. It's going to mean more people get sick. We have Q-tips to fight it.
That's helpful.
And there is no sign right now that Republicans in the Senate are willing to take on, or the White House, to take on the next big stimulus bill that is absolutely necessary.
Okay, so
that's
really bright
fun.
And cheery. Yeah.
The good news, though, there is always a little bit of good news, is that the House did figure out that it needed to figure out a way to work remotely. Yes. And has voted to do so.
Good. And they don't need the Senate to agree. That's good news. So proxy voting.
Proxy voting and committees that can work remotely.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's not so bad. It's a step in the right direction. Maybe the horse is out of the barn on money, let's say, but for oversight purposes. Also they weren't ever going to comply with them. But we'll be able to remotely denounce the administration for failure to comply.
Yes.
Good. Okay. Well, then they won't get sick doing it, and we don't have to cover that. That's good.
That's important. It's really important that the House doesn't get sick.
Sure.
Senate Republicans, on the other hand, this is just baffling to me, are having a buffet luncheon with the president today.
Good. Do you believe he's taking hydroxychloroquine, or are you a doubter?
I'm a doubter.
Okay. I wanted to make it safe for you to say you were a doubter, but you just jumped right in and said it.
I think, if anything, he might be taking something. I think they've probably given him a placebo.
That could be, right.
Because I don't think any medical professional would look at that as, Nancy Pelosi says, morbidly obese body.
Yeah.
That's already supposedly undergoing heart problems, and give him hydroxychloroquine.
It would be unwise. That's true. He may blurt out that I'm taking placebo brand hydroxychloroquine. It says it right on it.
No, I don't think that they let him know that it's a placebo.
No, he may not know what that means. Placebo means very, very strongly
even
powerful.
Better, stronger.
Yeah.
Placebo means stronger form of the drug. The bestest,
that could
strongest,
be it.
most tremendous form of the drug.
Nothing would say placebo on it, but it would be interesting to see what the pill. I think I would love to see them challenge him to take it on camera. But I don't know. Well, it's just a weird point. I don't know whether it matters whether he's taking it or not, except insofar as maybe he is, and it'll damage him in some way. But like we said earlier in the program, how do you tell?
They're having a buffet.
Yeah, yes, right. That was the important thing. Now I remember what I was not supposed to get distracted from. Yeah. Okay, so that's not going to do all that well. And who else is going to be there? Is it Trump? They're doing it in the Senate, or
they're doing it in the Senate. It's Tuesday, so it's lunch day for the conferences. He's going, and it's going to be all of the old white guys, median age 102 of the Senate Republican conference, and
good luck with that, everybody. I don't know who I'm kidding. Bad luck with that, everybody.
Bad luck with that. Yes.
Break both legs, I guess. I mean, literally. That's not the showbiz euphemism. I would like to see them all fall down the stairs, quite honestly, but that's going to be a rough going. I think they'll be doing enough damage to themselves having lunch with Trump And I guess, does anybody believe he's a germaphobe anymore? That's another question. Between hydroxychloroquine, I don't believe him about that, and I don't believe he's a germaphobe going to a buffet luncheon.
No, I don't either.
Okay, well, that's all right. Well, I like that we've landed on a good note at the end. For me, this is levity as far as I'm concerned.
Hopeful note.
Yeah, 50 elderly gentlemen could become violently ill. Well, okay. I'll accept that. This is a bright spot.
Here to bring a ray of sunshine into your day.
Right. The bicycles, that was fun news. This luncheon that could sicken the entire Republican Senate conference, also good news. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it.
You're most welcome. Hopefully I'll have something fun next week.
Right. And in 2 weeks, then it'll really be fun news, I think, if we just wait that long. Okay. We'll have results of the luncheon. I appreciate it, Joan. Thanks for taking the time.
You're most welcome next week.
Check in with you next week. We'll be halfway there. Excellent. Okay. Next up, of course, right here on Netroots Radio, the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I don't imagine that there's any topics left that we haven't already touched, but look for a new angle on all of them.
From Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
I'm looking at the preview here. I knew there would be something that we had missed and it would be super important. What's going on here? The Republicans are procuring 50,000 volunteers to do what? To intimidate voters that they deem suspicious at the polls in November. What dark purpose might be behind that? Next.